So before I begin to review independent games and whatnot, I figured now is a good time to do a quick then and now session over the latest games in the Sonic franchise, Sonic Colors, and Sonic Generations. The next mainstream Sonic game is bound to be announced sometime this year, so I figured now is a good time to see if these games have held up. And yes, this means I'm finally going to give my thoughts on the 3DS version of Sonic Generations. So with all that said, let's get started. Okay, let's tackle Sonic Colors first, which I originally reviewed in December of 2010. Since then, I've only dabbled in single levels from time to time, and I only recently took some time out of my day to complete a challenge run via the Egg Shuttle. After tackling the pathetically easy final boss, I'm happy to report that Sonic Colors was still a comfortably enjoyable time for me. The Whiz powers are still fun to use for the purpose of nabbing high scores and discovering extra goodies, Sonic's controls are really simple to get accustomed to, and there was never a time where I got totally aggravated. Some of the level design has become noticeably blander as time has passed, and I still think that despite Sonic being easy to handle, his 2D platforming skills can feel stiff at times. I gave criticism to Sonic's double jump in the original review, but since then I actually grew to enjoy it. I still think it could be pretty finicky when it comes to 2D platforming, but I found it saving my life more than hindering it. The music is some of the best to ever be produced for a Sonic game, and I still think the game holds up graphically well for a title on the Nintendo Wii. If you still haven't experienced it yet at this point, please give it a shot. This is a game that I think people other than the Sonic community can get enjoyment out of. It may not be a very long game, but I think it's enough to satisfy your platforming cravings. Now, on to Sonic Generations. You know what, let's get the 3DS version out of the way first. So, a few weeks after the release of the console version of the game, the Nintendo 3DS got its slice of Sonic with its own version of the game. Handheld versions of console games are rather notorious for getting the least amount of effort put into them, and goddamn it, this game screamed quick cash in from the start. Just like the console version, I was closely following screen caps, trailers, and gameplay demonstrations of this version of the game, and I was just not impressed. Still, the difference between watching and playing the game can mean everything, and I originally planned on reviewing this game just a few days after reviewing Sonic Generations on the Xbox 360. Here's the thing, guys. I didn't want to review the game by sticking a camera in front of it with the lights off. While the quality may be at most passable even with the proper settings, I found it to be just too much of a pain in the ass to set up. I know that a number of you people didn't mind how Metroid Prime Hunters or Metroid Prime Pinball came out, but I really wanted to invest in a capture device for the 3DS before doing this game. Now that I have one, I can finally give you my extremely late thoughts. Better late than never, I suppose. Generations 3DS follows the exact same story as the console version, so there's really no need to get into that. The levels, with the exception of Green Hill Zone, are entirely different, however, and there's not as many as the console counterpart. Representing the Genesis era, we have Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2 and Mushroom Hill Zone from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I refuse to acknowledge Sonic and Knuckles as a separate game anymore because it was originally not. That's just me though. For the Dreamcast era, we have only two representatives this time, Emerald Coast from Sonic Adventure 1 and Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. From the handheld era, we have Water Palace from Sonic Rush and the DS version of Tropical Resort from Sonic Colors DS. One common complaint from fans was why Generations 3DS didn't celebrate with more handheld levels from Sonic's past. Considering Sonic's steady success rate with his adventures on the Game Gear, the advanced titles on the Game Boy Advance, and the Rush series for the DS, I can't help but think this as well. And by including two levels from handheld games in conjunction with console levels, it feels very haphazard and last minute. The name of the game is still similar. In one act you take control of classic Sonic where gameplay is very similar to its Genesis roots, and in the other act you take control of modern Sonic where the focus is not of 3D platforming, but rather the breakneck 2D action and speed of Sonic Rush. So we have two styles of 2D platforming action, one where Sonic's fast and one where Sonic's faster. If you recall from my initial review of Sonic Generations, with classic Sonic in the scene, I couldn't help but feel that modern Sonic's 2D sections, while sporadic, came off as a bit redundant, and that issue is extremely blatant here. Not a fan of 2D Sonic? Well, how about a faster 2D Sonic? Still not interested? Well, then this game isn't for you. There's no 3D in this game whatsoever. I think this could have been a fantastic opportunity to try out the adventure formula with modern Sonic on a handheld, but they opted for Sonic Rush instead. And while I do enjoy the Rush formula to an extent, this isn't exactly what I had in mind for an anniversary game. To make matters worse, the level design can be horribly bleak at times. To start off, the Genesis levels with classic Sonic are ripped right out of their Genesis counterparts. I am not kidding, they are the exact same levels from the older games. Sure, they got a graphical treatment, but if the console version of the Genesis levels got completely new level designs, what's this game's excuse? New level designs had to be incorporated for classic Sonic when it came to the Dreamcast era and above, but this isn't exactly what I would call good design. If it's not disjointed platforming with the occasional spring-loaded section or the abundance of bottomless pits in the later half of the game, It's the large number of times where nothing interesting is happening in the level, or when the process of getting to a higher area is whether or not you can use the homing attack at the proper time with Classic Sonic. Yes, I said Classic Sonic. After you complete Mushroom Hill Zone and enter Emerald Coast, Classic Sonic is granted the homing attack just like his modern self. Come on guys, why stop there? Why not give Classic Sonic a boost button, give him some green contact lenses and grow his hair out? Giving Classic Sonic the homing attack really drives the whole redundancy issue I mentioned earlier home. Speaking of modern Sonic, I don't think his level design is much better. I find it refreshing to play a Sonic Rush style game with sound effects that don't sound like something out of an NES, but I think games like Sonic Rush and the like definitely had more interesting level gimmicks and structure. When I'm playing a level here with modern Sonic, I can't help but feel the process of designing his stages was just taking the infrastructure of a previously designed stage and stretching it out to make sure modern Sonic doesn't complete it in less than 20 seconds. Because of this, there's numerous times in modern Sonic's levels where he's just effortlessly running across a straight line, bombarding everything in his path with the boost button. There are times when things get a little more exciting, but these moments are few and far between. I think the absolute worst stage in the game is Radical Highway. This place is just a bore for both classic and modern Sonic. Long stretches where nothing happens, bottomless pits where you don't want bottomless pits to be, and confusing as fuck navigation. Modern Sonic's remix of Radical Highway's theme also sounds like it's coming out of a synthesizer's asshole. If I could talk about the music for a second, the remixes are for the most part really great to listen to, especially the recreated Emerald Coast music, but what the fuck happened here? The process of beating the game is completing both acts of the zone, collecting a Chaos Emerald via a special stage, and defeating both the rival battle and the boss battle of their respective era. Entering a special stage is just as easy as picking it on the level select and trying to nab the emerald. There are no special requirements needed to get here. When I first played these special stages, I was horrified. They're structured exactly like the special stages from Sonic Heroes, collecting orbs to build a boost mirror to chase after the emerald. Luckily, the control here completely shits on the slippery mess that was Sonic Heroes control. I think these may be the easiest special stages in Sonic history. I didn't fuck up a single time when playing these, and that's never happened with me in any other special stage in any other Sonic game, period. For the boss fights, we had both rival battles and recreations of classic foes. Firstly, the rival battles, with the exception of maybe Metal Sonic, are nothing like the HD version. They're all monotonous races to the finish that don't leave any impression whatsoever. The bigger boss battles are a little better, but still not very impressive. The battle against Big Arm is nostalgic, but easier given the predictable patterns of the boss. The Bio-Lizard fight, while I'm happy it's not as unforgiving as the original fight was back in Sonic Adventure 2, can get uninteresting very fast, and the Egg Emperor battle is just a watered-down version of his battle from Sonic Heroes. Ironically, I find the battle with the Time Eater in this version to be a hell of a lot more enjoyable than the HD version. It's nothing remarkable, but there's more to do here than just fly in a straight line and wait until the game allows you to strike the core. You also don't have your friends constantly warning you about homing shots or to be careful. Holy shit, that got annoying. For the 3DS, I think the overall graphics of Generations is okay. It's colorful, the models are passable, and the sound direction is about on par with a console Sonic game. In terms of appearance, every level looks pretty good with the 3D treatment, and the use of the 3D slider can make certain graphics pop up for more immersion. Though seeing as I don't utilize the 3D function of the 3DS much, I don't think that's saying much. The game will probably only take you a few hours to complete, and there's not much to do after that. You can unlock various missions in mission mode by playing more and more of the game, or by collecting play coins via the Street Pass feature of the 3DS. I don't even bother with this sort of thing. This game doesn't interest me for very long as it is, so this all seems rather useless. To be fair, I was expecting Sonic Generations 3DS to be made on the cheap. My expectations were far lower than what I expected for the HD version of the game. Is it good for a distraction? Maybe. I mean, I did at least complete the game, so that's gotta mean something, right? Actually, to the game's credit, I think classic Sonic here controls more fluidly than his HD counterpart. Rolling can be a useful means to gain speed, you can do the Badnik bounce, and his overall physics feel closer to the Genesis games without actually being in the Genesis games. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean much with level design such as this, and Generations for the 3DS is packed with it. It looks and sounds good, but when it comes to the game itself, I think you're better off playing something else. To wrap this up, let's finish with the HD version of the game. I can't believe how fast time flies, it's already been a year and a half since I reviewed this game. For an anniversary game, I thought this was a damn fine celebration of 20 years of the Blue Hedgehog. I didn't think the story was very good, and I felt it was lacking in many areas, which was especially disappointing after enjoying Sonic Color Story so much. Since I reviewed it for the channel, Sonic Generations has been the Sonic game I found myself going back to for shits and giggles the most. I still think the level design is the best I've seen in a recent Sonic game, and while the themes may not be original, there's just too much fun for me here to really care. I'm still finding all sorts of nooks and crannies I didn't see at first when I played the game back in November of 2011, and doing so makes me think there was a considerable amount of effort placed here. When revisiting the game, I find myself replaying modern Sonic more than classic Sonic because I honestly think modern Sonic stages are better designed and have more to offer. Don't get me wrong, I think classic Sonic has its upsides as well, especially with power-ups and skills, but I enjoy the energy-filled stages of modern Sonic a little more. I don't often bother with challenge acts or boss battles, but I always find myself replaying stages from all the eras, and I constantly try to beat my fastest times. I will say, I am absolutely sick of classic City Escape, and I think you know why. After I nabbed every achievement on the Xbox 360 version of the game, I had no problem beating this game again on Steam. In fact, if I were to recommend what I think is the de facto version of the game, it's the PC version, assuming you have the specs to run it. You get the best graphical fidelity, a smooth 60 frames per second, and little to no load times. If a smoother gaming experience isn't enough to convince you to nab the PC version of the game, you should take a look at the modding community to see how you can possibly inject more game time into this version. I won't bother covering the dozens upon dozens of fan creations thanks to hacking the game, but I do want to bring up the Unleashed project. It's a mod created by the Sonic Retro community that allows you to play the daytime levels of Sonic Unleashed with the gameplay style of Sonic Generations. That means no QuickTime events, no medals to unlock extra stages, and no need to play the Warthog to advance to the Sonic levels. This is a seriously awesome mod, and if you have the PC version of Sonic Generations, but have not yet experienced the HD version of the best part of Sonic Unleashed, I really think you should get this mod. There are a few graphical quirks here and there, but this is pretty much Sonic Unleashed as I remembered it, with even better performance. It's so odd playing Adabat without seeing my frame rate drop to absolute shit, and I'm just amazed at what the people of Sonic Retro can do when they put their minds to it. Sonic Generations is just as much fun now as it was when I first played it. If you're a fan of Sonic or platformers and still haven't played it, you can get it for real cheap nowadays. Like Sonic Colors, I highly recommend you play it. These are what I called well-crafted games, and I truly hope the next game in the mainstream line expands even further on the formula, complete with fresh level designs and gimmicks that add to the experience rather than take away. With all that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, you guys have a great night, and take care. Can't stick around.